The fabric ripples. Sub-Lieutenant Brian Rose feels it through his gloves, the canvas skin of his Fairey Swordfish shuddering in the February wind. 50 feet above the English Channel, the torpedo beneath his fuselage weighs 1,610 pounds. His aircraft, designed in 1933, has a maximum speed of 138 miles per hour. The Messerschmitt Bf 109s diving toward him can reach 385. "Fighters! 10 o'clock!" The voice crackles through the speaking tube, but Rose already sees them, black crosses against gray clouds, cannon muzzles winking gold. He drops lower, 40 feet, 30. Salt spray stings his face through the open cockpit. Behind him, leading airman Ginger Johnson swivels his single Lewis gun, the weapon rattling uselessly against 20mm cannon shells that punch through their wings like fists through paper. This is 12:35 p.m., February 12, 1942. 20 minutes ago, 6 obsolete biplanes left RAF Manston on a mission their commander knew was suicide. They were promised 60 Spitfires for escort. 10 arrived. They were trained for a night attack. This is broad daylight. They were volunteers for a desperate gamble. Now. Through the smoke ahead, Rose sees them. The battle cruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, 32,000 tons each, bristling with flat guns. The heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, 30 destroyers, an aerial umbrella of 280 German fighters stacked from sea level to 2,000 feet. And 6 fabric-covered biplanes flying into hell at the speed of a family car. The first Swordfish, Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmonds, suddenly blooms orange. Direct hit. The port wing disintegrates. The aircraft doesn't fall immediately. It keeps flying toward those battleships, even as flames consume it. Rose's hands tighten on the controls. His torpedo is still attached. His mission is still possible. Stay with this story, because what happens in the next 10 minutes will redefine the word courage.
March 1941. The German battlecruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau limp into Brest Harbor on the French coast after a successful Atlantic raiding campaign. They've sunk 22 merchant ships, 116,000 tons of British supplies at the bottom of the ocean. In May, the heavy cruiser Prince Eugen joins them, fresh from the Bismarck operation. For 11 months, these ships sit in Brest, trapped. The RAF bombs them relentlessly, 3,299 sorties, 4,000 tons of ordnance. The Germans can't move them north to Germany without running a gauntlet through the English Channel, the narrowest strait in Europe, 21 miles wide at Dover, bristling with British coastal guns, destroyers, submarines, and hundreds of aircraft. Adolf Hitler demands they return. Every hour the ships remain in Brest, he tells Admiral Raeder. They are worthless. In Norway, they threaten Allied convoys to Russia. The British plan for this, Operation Fuller, a coordinated assault involving motor torpedo boats, destroyers, bombers, coastal artillery, submarines, and fleet air-armed torpedo planes. The plan requires early detection. The ships must be spotted leaving Brest, giving time for forces to assemble. Enter 825 Naval Air Squadron. Reformed after losing all their Swordfish when HMS Ark Royal sank 3 months earlier, they're based at RAF Manston, commanded by 32-year-old Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond. On February 4, 6 new Swordfish arrive in a snowstorm. The crews are green, barely trained. They practice night attacks in brutal weather. "We trained for darkness," observer Edgar Lee will later recall. "We never imagined they'd ask us to attack a fleet in daylight." February 11, 1942. Esmond travels to London. King George VI pins the Distinguished Service Order to his chest, recognition for his torpedo attack on the Bismarck 9 months prior. The next morning, German radar picks up the British submarine Sea Lion surfacing to recharge batteries. The Channel Dash begins, and Operation Fuller starts to unravel before it even starts.
The Fairey Swordfish was never meant to fight in 1942. Designed in 1933 by a team at Fairey Aviation in Hayes, West London, the TSR-2, Torpedo Spotter Reconnaissance, was cutting-edge technology for its time. A biplane, fabric-covered wings stretched over metal frames, an open cockpit, a Bristol Pegasus radial engine producing 690 horsepower. In the workshops, engineers wrestled with a fundamental problem. How do you make an aircraft slow enough to land on a pitching carrier deck, yet stable enough to drop a torpedo accurately? Their solution was counterintuitive: make it slower. The Swordfish's stall speed, the point where it would fall from the sky, was just 56 miles per hour. With full flaps deployed, a skilled pilot could practically hover. On carrier decks and heavy seas, this meant life or death. The aircraft could match the ship's forward speed, creating near-zero relative motion for landing. The torpedo mechanism was brilliant in its simplicity. A single 18-inch torpedo mounted beneath the fuselage on a crutch that released with a lever pull. Drop height, 18 feet. Drop speed, 90 knots exactly. Deviation by more than 10 knots or 5 feet, and the torpedo would either bounce off the water or dive too deep and run beneath the target. Training crews to hit this narrow window took months. By 1942, the Swordfish was an antique. The Fairey Albacore was supposed to replace it. The Fairey Barracuda was in development. But the string-bag, as crews affectionately called it, after the housewives' shopping bags that could carry anything, kept flying because it did one thing perfectly. It put torpedoes exactly where they needed to be. At Toronto in November 1940, Swordfish sank one Italian battleship and crippled two others. Against Bismarck in May 1941, a Swordfish torpedo jammed the giant's rudder. Both attacks occurred at night. In darkness, slowness was an advantage, but in daylight, against modern fighters, that was never the plan.
February 12, 1942, 6 a.m. 825 Squadron stands at readiness in the pre-dawn darkness. Frost coats the wings of their Swordfish. Ground crews have been working through the night, keeping engines warm, torpedoes at precisely 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Too cold in the mechanism jams. Lion, positioned outside Brest Harbor, withdrew to recharge batteries at the critical moment. The departure went undetected. The second failure, RAF Coastal Command's radar-equipped Hudson patrol aircraft suffered equipment malfunctions. 3 separate patrol gaps in the surveillance net between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Vice Admiral Ciliac's flotilla slips through like smoke. By 10:42 a.m., the German ships are off Le Touquet, halfway through the channel. 2 RAF Spitfire pilots on a routine patrol spot them by accident. They land at 11:09 a.m., report, big ships, destroyer screen, looked like Scharnhorst. Chaos. At Dover, Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay scrambles to activate Operation Fuller, but the plan required hours of preparation. The bombers aren't ready. The destroyers are at Harwich, 70 miles away. The motor torpedo parts are scattered. Only one force is ready, 6 Swordfish at Manston. At 11:30 a.m., the order comes down. Eugene Esmond is told the situation. He's also told he can refuse. This was supposed to be a night mission, and he's getting a fraction of the promised fighter cover. Esmond's response is one sentence. Tell them to get the fighters here by 12:25. For the love of God, on time. At 12:20 p.m., the 6 Swordfish taxi through melting snow, torpedoes armed, fuel tanks topped off. Station Commander Tom Gleave watches them go. Later, he'll write, Esmond's face was tense and white. It was the face of a man already dead. It shocked me, as nothing has since. 5 squadrons of Spitfires were promised. 1 squadron, 10 aircraft, arrives. Esmond waves his hand and dives to 50 feet. The Swordfish head out to sea.
At Luftwaffe headquarters in occupied France, the reports stream in. 6 aircraft approaching from the English coast, type unknown, speed estimated 140 kilometers per hour. The German intelligence officer pauses. 140 kilometers per hour? That's slower than some reconnaissance aircraft. Confirmation comes seconds later. Biplanes. They appear to be Swordfish. Laughter in the operations room. Admiral Otto Ciliax, commanding the flotilla from Scharnhorst's bridge, receives the warning with disbelief. Swordfish? In daylight? Against his battle group of 3 capital ships, 6 destroyers, 14 torpedo boats, and continuous fighter cover? He calls it the mothball Navy attack. But the laughter stops when the tactical picture clarifies. These aren't just any Swordfish, they're torpedo bombers. If even one 1,610-pound Mark 12 torpedo strikes below the waterline at 40 knots, it could cripple a battlecruiser. The narrow channel means no room to maneuver. If the British aircraft achieve a proper fan attack, torpedoes converging from multiple angles, evading them all becomes impossible. Ciliax issues immediate orders. All ships increase to maximum speed, all anti-aircraft crews to battle stations, all destroyers form defensive screen, request maximum fighter coverage over the next grid square. Within 3 minutes, the Luftwaffe commits 2 full Staffels, approximately 30 Messerschmitt Bf-109s to intercept. They're already airborne, part of the 280 aircraft umbrella protecting the flotilla. At RAF Fighter Command, Air Vice Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory scrambles to coordinate the promised 5 Spitfire squadrons, but poor weather has grounded some. Others are refueling. Communication breakdowns mean some squadrons don't even know the operation is live. The result? A catastrophic mismatch. 6 Swordfish, 10 Spitfires. Versus 3 battleships, 30 escort vessels, and 300 German fighters. At 12:32 p.m., Squadron Leader Brian Kincombe's Spitfires make contact with the Swordfish over Ramsgate. 2 minutes later, the first Messerschmitts attack. The slaughter begins.
The first burst catches them over open water. Petty Officer Jack Clinton, rear gunner in Esmond's lead Swordfish, hears the scream of the dive before he sees it. Bf-109s, 3 of them, coming down at 400 miles per hour. He swings his single Vickers machine gun, .303 caliber, firing 950 rounds per minute, hopelessly outmatched against 20mm cannon. He fires anyway. Tracer rounds arc upward. The Messerschmitts flash past, cannon shells walking across the fabric wing. Holes appear, 1, 5, 12. The aircraft shudders, but keeps flying. "They're coming around again," Clinton's voice through the speaking tube. Esmond doesn't respond. He's focused on one thing, keeping the nose pointed at those battleships, now visible through the murk. 7 miles. 6. Behind him, Sub-Lieutenant Pat Kingsmill's Swordfish takes a 20mm shell through the fuel tank. It doesn't explode, miraculous, but fuel streams out, a rainbow shimmer in the frozen air. His engine begins to sputter. Above, the 10 Spitfires from 72 Squadron are fighting like demons. Squadron Leader Kincombe gets 1 Bf-109, a brief bloom of orange, but they're impossibly outnumbered. For every German fighter they engage, 2 more slip through to the Swordfish. 5 miles. The destroyer screen opens fire, 4-inch guns, 37mm flak, everything. The sky fills with black puffs, each one a lethal sphere of shrapnel. A shell detonates 10 feet from Esmond's wing, canvas shreds, metal framework shows through. He keeps flying. 4 miles. Then the battleships themselves fire. The massive 11-inch main guns aren't designed for anti-aircraft work, but at point-blank range, even a near miss from a shell that size will tear an aircraft apart. The sea erupts in waterspouts, shockwaves buffet the Swordfish like toys. Esmond's port wing is now more whole than fabric. 3 miles. He releases his torpedo. 1 second later, a direct hit. The Swordfish disintegrates in midair.
The Mark 12 torpedo weighed 1,610 pounds fully loaded. Length, 17 feet 7 inches. Diameter, 18 inches. Warhead, 388 pounds of TNT. Drop parameters were brutally specific. Minimum altitude, 18 feet above water. Maximum, 25 feet. Any higher and the torpedo would porpoise, skip across the surface and break apart. Drop speed, 90 knots exactly. Faster and water resistance would crush the nose cone. Slower and the torpedo wouldn't achieve proper depth. The Swordfish's Mark 9 bomb sight required the pilot to visually align 2 marks while maintaining exact airspeed and altitude. At night, this was difficult. In daylight, under fire, with the aircraft disintegrating around you, nearly impossible. The torpedo's gyroscope took 3.2 seconds to stabilize after water entry. During this phase, the torpedo traveled in whatever direction it entered, straight if the drop was perfect, wildly off course if not. Once stabilized, a depth-keeping mechanism held it at 12 feet below the surface. Top speed, 40 knots. Effective range, 1,500 yards. Beyond that, the torpedo ran out of compressed air. This created the kill zone paradox. To launch successfully, the Swordfish had to penetrate within 1,500 yards of their targets, while maintaining 18 to 25 feet altitude and 90 knots airspeed, all while being shot at by dozens of guns specifically designed to destroy aircraft at exactly that altitude and range. The German 37mm Flak 43 had an effective ceiling of 4,800 feet, but was most lethal between sea level and 500 feet. Rate of fire, 250 rounds per minute. Each shell contained 640 grams of explosive and fragmentation material. Scharnhorst alone mounted 14 37mm guns, plus 28 20mm cannons. Do the math? That's 3,500 rounds per minute from one ship. The Swordfish's fabric covering was doped linen, 0.6 millimeters thick. A single 20mm shell could punch through the entire aircraft, cockpit, engine, tail, without slowing down. Against this, the crews wore leather flight jackets and hoped.
Edgar Lee was 20 years old.
The observer and Sub-Lieutenant Brian Rose's Swordfish, he'd joined 825 Squadron 3 months earlier. On the morning of February 12th, he dressed in his flight gear, knowing with absolute certainty that he wouldn't come back. "We didn't talk about it," he recalled 65 years later, "but we all knew. When Esmond gave the order to taxi, nobody hesitated, nobody refused. We just went." The psychology of the one-way mission is specific and strange. Military researchers who studied kamikaze pilots, Operation Chastise crews, and other near-certain death missions note a common pattern. Once the decision is made, fear transforms into a kind of mechanical calm. You focus on procedure, on doing your job correctly, on not letting down the men beside you. Sub-Lieutenant Pat Kingsmill, piloting the 3rd Swordfish, had written a letter to his parents the night before. He didn't mail it. He left it on his bunk, unsealed, with instructions for his roommate. The letter described the weather, what he'd had for dinner. It mentioned nothing about the mission. "If you're reading this," it ended, "I was thinking of you." In the cockpit, with cannon shells ripping through fabric and the sea rushing past at 50 feet, Kingsmill's hands were steady. When his fuel tank was punctured and his engine began to die, he didn't break formation. He flew on, compensating for the power loss by subtle adjustments to pitch and trim until he was close enough to release his torpedo. Only then did he allow himself to crash. Leading Airman Don Bunce, the rear gunner, fired his Lewis gun until the ammunition ran out. Then he fired his pistol. Then he braced for impact as the Swordfish hit the channel at 85 miles per hour. The water was 38 degrees Fahrenheit. He survived.
The German after-action reports are clinical. 1250 hours, 6 enemy torpedo aircraft engaged and destroyed. Time elapsed, 18 minutes. Ammunition expended, estimated 14,000 rounds mixed caliber. Torpedoes observed in water, 5 confirmed. Hits on capital ships, 0. Damage to escort vessels, 0. Luftwaffe losses, 2 aircraft, 1 Bf-109 to Spitfire, 1 FW-190 to defensive fire. Enemy survivors, 5 recovered by British motor launches. But Admiral Ciliax's personal diary tells a different story. February 12, 1800 hours. The attack this afternoon was the most frightening moment of the entire operation. Not because of tactical danger, our defenses performed perfectly, but because of what it represented. 6 obsolete aircraft, flown by men who knew they would die, pressed their attack with such determination that for 17 minutes I genuinely believed we might be hit. He wrote one more line. The British are either insane or possess a quality we cannot measure. British intelligence scrambled to understand what happened. How did 3 German capital ships transit the English Channel undetected for 9 hours? The post-operation analysis revealed 7 critical failures. Submarine Sea Lion's battery recharge coinciding with the departure window. RAF Hudson radar malfunctions during 3 patrol sweeps. Cloud cover obscuring visual observation. German signals intelligence jamming British agent communications from Brest. Poor inter-service coordination between Navy RAF Bomber Command and RAF Fighter Command. Inadequate Spitfire range. The fighters couldn't escort slow torpedo bombers without running out of fuel. The final failure, doctrinal rigidity. Operation Fuller assumed night operations. When the Germans moved in daylight, the entire plan collapsed. Within weeks, the Admiralty implemented changes, improved radar maintenance protocols, dedicated long-range fighter escorts for torpedo squadrons, enhanced coordination procedures, and crucially, a standing order that no Fleet Air Arm Squadron would be committed to a daylight capital ship attack without overwhelming fighter superiority. The Swordfish would continue flying, but never again like this. The lesson was written in blood.
Of the 18 men who took off from Manston at 12:25 p.m., 5 survived. Sub-Lieutenant Edgar Lee and Sub-Lieutenant Brian Rose pulled from the freezing channel by motor torpedo boat MTB-221. Leading Airman Don Bunce rescued after firing his pistol at German fighters until the gun clicked empty. 2 others, both wounded, recovered by British destroyers racing north from Harwich. 13 died. Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond's body was recovered by a British trawler on April 28, 1942, 75 days after he was shot down. A gold ring on his left little finger, inscribed Jerusalem, confirmed his identity. He was buried with full naval honors at Gillingham Cemetery on April 30th. On March 3, 1942, King George VI approved the posthumous award of the Victoria Cross to Esmond. The citation ended. His high courage and splendid resolution will live in the traditions of the Royal Navy and will remain for many generations a fine memory. The irony, the mission failed. None of the 5 torpedoes that entered the water struck their targets. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau reached German ports. But both ships struck mines in the North Sea, mines laid by RAF Bomber Command days earlier in routine gardening operations. Gneisenau was bombed in dry dock on February 26 and never sailed again. Scharnhorst was sunk at the Battle of North Cape in December 1943. The Channel Dash succeeded tactically, but failed strategically. The ships Germany tried so desperately to save were neutralized within a year. But the mission's real legacy isn't tactical, it's moral. Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay wrote, "This gallant sortie constitutes one of the finest exhibitions of self-sacrifice and devotion to duty the war has ever witnessed." Even Admiral Ciliax, the enemy commander, wrote, "The mothball attack of a handful of ancient planes, piloted by men whose bravery surpasses any other action by either side that day." Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical or documented sources.